All right, let's dive deep into The Green Mile. This film, man, it takes us on a journey. Death row, miracles, you name it. We're going to be unpacking a recap and review for this cinematic masterpiece. And let me tell you, it's much more than just your average prison drama.
You know, what really gets me about the Green Mile is how they drop you right into Cold Mountain Penitentiary, specifically death row. A place, honestly, most of us will never have to experience, thankfully. They call it the Green Mile in the film because of the floor, this faded lime green floor,
Yeah.
which is a pretty chilling detail. Really sets the stage, for all the heavy stuff they explore.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like you can feel it, that oppressive atmosphere, like life and death are just hanging there. And then, boom, John Coffey walks in. This giant of a man, wrongly convicted, I might add, of a truly horrific crime. But here's the thing. He's got this imposing physique, right? But then he's also got this childlike innocence and a fear of the dark. It makes you wonder, how could someone like that be capable of such brutality?
It's really clever how they do that. Frank Darabont, the director, uses that contrast, that juxtaposition to hook you right from the start, creates this mystery, this intrigue. You're left trying to figure it out, and that tension, it keeps you going.
Keeps you on the edge of your seat, yeah. And we see it all through Paul Edgecombe's eyes. He's this compassionate guard. And his journey, man, from skeptic to believer, especially when he sees those healing powers firsthand. Can you imagine a death row inmate curing your bladder infection? Just like that, with a touch.
That scene is wild, man. The way they show John breathing out, this swarm of dark energy, it's like he's pulling the sickness out. Creepy, but kind of awesome, too. That's the turning point, really, where the film takes that supernatural turn and suddenly everything's up in the air for the characters and for us watching.
Totally, like the rules don't apply anymore. But The Green Mile, it's not just John Coffey's story. It's got this whole cast of characters, each one adding something unique. Take Percy Wetmore, for example. That sadistic guard. You can practically feel his cruelty. That scene where he messes up the execution, it's hard to stomach. Shows you how dark humans can be.
Right. Percy's like the opposite of Paul. He represents that abuse of power, the inhumanity you find in these systems. It makes you think, where do you stand on that spectrum? Good versus evil.
Yeah, heavy stuff. And then you've got Wild Bill Wharton.
Yeah.
Completely unpredictable, always stirring up trouble. He embodies that constant threat of violence. That hangs over the whole place. Such a contrast to John Coffey's gentleness.
Wild Bill, he adds this whole other layer of tension, right? Just
Right.
like this force of nature, reminding you that darkness is always lurking, even in a place like death row.
Yeah, it's always there. And then things take this crazy turn. When Paul and the other guards decide to take John to the warden's wife, Melinda, she's terminally ill. They're desperate, willing to risk everything for this act of mercy. But the question is, can John's powers work outside the prison walls? Can he actually cheat death?
Talk about moral dilemmas. They're putting their careers on the line, their freedom, everything. To help someone in need, it really makes you question those rigid rules, those systems when you're faced with suffering.
Makes you think about what's truly important. And then the truth comes out. Wild Bill, he's the murderer all along. John shares the memory of the crime with Paul, proving his innocence, adding this whole other layer of tragedy. I mean, how can they even think about executing him now?
Yeah, that's where everything flips. We're forced to see how the justice system can fail. Paul's inner struggle, it's heartbreaking. Knowing the truth, but being bound by duty.
It's just devastating, knowing an innocent man is going to die. And then there's John's final walk. Down the Green Mile, he asks not to wear the hood because he's afraid of the dark. Such a small thing, but so powerful.
It tells you everything you need to know about John. Despite all that power, he's still vulnerable, like a child. It brings you back to that question. How can someone so gentle be accused of such things?
It's a question that stays with you, even as we see what happens after. Paul leaves the prison, haunted. And then, the twist. Paul's been given this incredibly long life. It's a blessing and a curse. Thanks to John's healing touch, he's stuck with life. Well, John, who wanted peace, was denied.
It's such a bittersweet ending, full of irony and sadness. It shows how even good intentions can have these unintended consequences. Paul's long life, it's a constant reminder of the injustice he was a part of. But before we dive deeper into all the symbolism and themes, what are your initial thoughts? What's stuck with you so far? One of the things that makes this movie so gripping is how it tackles these huge, complex themes. It's not just about life on death row. It's a deep dive into justice, mercy, and even the supernatural.
Absolutely. You were talking about the death penalty before,
Yeah.
and they don't shy away from it. from the brutality of it. I mean, you see it with Delacroix's botched execution, and you feel it with John Coffey's last walk.
Exactly, you're right there with them. The film really forces you to confront it head on, capital punishment, I mean, and makes you question the whole thing, especially when you consider the possibility of executing an innocent person, like John Coffey.
It's chilling, really. Makes you wonder how often that's happened. Throughout history, you know? And the film doesn't try to give easy answers, which makes it all the more powerful, I think. But even with all the darkness and despair, there's this thread of humanity that runs through the whole film, the way the guards treat the inmates, with a certain level of respect. Even someone like Wild Bill.
Yeah, I noticed that too, even on death row, where you'd think all hope is lost. There's this recognition that everyone's human. The guards, like Paul, they get it. Everyone on the Green Mile, condemned or not, they're all dealing with life and death in their own way.
Yeah, they're all connected in a way. And then there's Paul's compassion towards John. I mean, it goes beyond empathy. He's willing to put everything on the line to ease John's pain. Remember when they took him to heal Melinda?
Talk about taking a risk. That act of mercy, it breaks down those walls, the prison walls, I mean. It shows you there's something bigger at play, something that values compassion over blindly following the rules. Sometimes doing the right thing means bending the law or even breaking it.
It definitely makes you question the system and where real compassion fits in. The healing itself is just, wow. Physically and spiritually, there's something almost transcendent about it.
It's a recurring theme, right? The idea of healing. It's not just about John's powers, but about the human capacity for kindness. Even in a place as harsh as Cold Mountain, you see these glimpses of hope. The guards trying to make Delacroix comfortable. John comforting the inmate who's afraid of the dark.
Yeah, these small acts. They're like a reminder that human connection matters, even in the face of death. And of course, we can't forget the supernatural stuff. John's healing powers, his ability to sense emotions. It's pure Stephen King.
Oh, absolutely. It's woven into the story so seamlessly. Makes you wonder if maybe there's more to the world than we realize.
It definitely makes you question things.
Yeah.
What would you do? If you saw something that defied all logic, would you embrace it or hold on to what you know?
That ties back to faith, doesn't it? Belief. What does it mean to believe in something you can't see or fully understand? How far would you go to defend that belief?
Exactly. It makes you think about your own beliefs and what you'd be willing to sacrifice for them. We've talked about justice, mercy, the supernatural. But the Green Mile goes even deeper than that. They use symbolism to add layers of meaning.
Oh, yeah, it's rich with symbolism, like the Green Mile itself. It's more than just a hallway, right? It's a symbol of that journey to death.
Each step brings them closer to the end. And that faded green, it reinforces the feeling of decay, of life slipping away. And then there's John Coffey. He's often seen as a Christ-like figure. He can heal, he takes on the suffering of others, and he sacrifices himself, even though he's innocent.
It's a powerful parallel, for sure. John's compassion, his selflessness, it stands out against all the cruelty and injustice and his fear of the dark. It makes him even more human, more vulnerable.
It's a reminder that even with immense power, we all need comfort, we all need connection. It makes his sacrifice even more heartbreaking, knowing he didn't have to do it.
It makes you think about sacrifice, about whether true redemption requires suffering. But before we move on to the film's impact, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the symbolism? Have you considered any other interpretations?
It's hard to ignore those parallels, right? With John Coffey and, his ability to heal, taking on others' pain, even his initials, JC. It all points in that direction.
Definitely seems intentional, right? Adds a whole other layer to the story. Like, John represents this pure goodness, almost a divine presence, in the middle of this harsh reality.
And his death, man. As tragic as it is, there's this element of redemption to it. Not just for him, but for everyone around him. It makes you think about grace, even when things are so unfair.
Yeah, that's the heart of it. Forgiveness,
For those who've done wrong, and for those who've been wronged.
It's like saying true peace comes from compassion and understanding.
And speaking of impact, we touched on the death penalty earlier. And I think it's safe to say the Green Mile has really made people think about it in a different way.
For sure, it's had a huge impact. It humanizes the people on death row, reminds us they're individuals, with stories, families, hopes, dreams. John Coffey's case, especially, highlights how easily things can go wrong, and how irreversible the consequences can be.
It's a heavy thought, man. Makes you confront your own beliefs about justice, about punishment.
Right. It's not about giving easy answers. It's about making us wrestle with these tough questions.
That's what makes it so powerful. It sticks with you, you know?
Absolutely. It's not just entertainment. It stays in your mind long after it's over. It makes you reflect, think about yourself, and hopefully you come out with a deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
You know, one thing that always gets me is the range of emotions it brings up, the weight of the setting, the sorrow, but also those moments of hope, then the tragedy. It's a lot to process.
It's masterfully done, though. The pacing, the actors, the music, it all builds to this incredibly moving experience.
It stays with you, that's for sure. The characters, the things they say, those gut-wrenching scenes, it becomes more than just a movie.
Yeah, it's an experience you carry with you.
It's more than a film at that point.
Exactly, and that's what makes it great, right? It goes beyond just entertaining you. It becomes a part of you.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Green Mile, what's the one thing you hope people take away from it?
I hope they see it as more than just a prison drama, more than a thriller even. It's a story about what it means to be human, about good and evil, compassion, the mysteries of life and death.
I like that, a story about humanity.
Hey.
And if you haven't seen The Green Mile, I highly recommend checking it out. Pay attention to all the things we talked about, the symbolism, the characters, the themes. Let it all sink in.
And if you have seen it, maybe this deep dive gave you a new perspective, a new way to appreciate it.
Exactly, a fresh set of eyes. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey down the Green Mile. We hope it sparked some interesting thoughts and maybe even inspired you to rewatch this incredible film.